to the Tuesday, May 26th, Rapid City Public Works Committee meeting. I'd like to begin the meeting with the roll call and determination of quorum, please.
Estes? Here. Doyle? Here. Roberts? Scott? Here. Wright? We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now's the time to adopt the agenda. If there's any additions or subtractions or modifications, I would hear from any committee members. Seeing no lights, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as written. I've got a motion by Doyle to adopt the agenda, a second by Estes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The agenda has been adopted. Now's the time for general public comment. This is a time for members of the public to bring forth any concerns or opinions to the seated committee present today for items that are not currently on the agenda for today. I do happen to have 3 public speaker request forms, and so we'll start with the first one. I've got a speaker request form from Janelle Fink. You have 3 minutes to give us your opinion or suggestions or any questions or concerns. The green light means you can continue to speak. The yellow light means you have about 30 seconds. And if red, if you could wrap it up. And we're waiting to hear from you, Janelle. Oh, and please state your name and your affiliation to the city for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Janelle Fink. I'm with Fisk Land Surveying, and I'm here as agent and on behalf of my client, Larry Stevens. I'm here today to talk to you about the lot line adjustment consolidation process for plats. For those of you who are not present, several years ago when this whole process began, I'm going to try in a very nutshell to give you a synopsis of what we did. I realize my time is short, though. In October of 2010, Mayor Hanks convened a committee of citizens and design professionals that was later called the Second Floor Review Committee, and our charge was to review the current ordinances for platting and other processes, suggest improvements where we could, reduce meeting time, shorten the process, make it more user-friendly where we could. In November of 2010, the first item that we came up with was a platting chart where we reconfigured the platting process at that time and came up with some different options that would be more expedient. One of the items was called a lot line adjustment or consolidation plat. And the theory behind that was whenever you had lots or parcels that were already in existence and people were either consolidating them or just adjusting a lot line or a parcel line between neighbors, so to speak, that you wouldn't have to address subdivision improvement requirements since you were not increasing density. So the threshold of the whole process was if there was no increase in density, these things would qualify for a lot line adjustment or consolidation process. Simplified version, administrative approval, no improvements were required. And in January of 2011, that chart and the concept was presented to Planning Commission, who enthusiastically endorsed it. On January 18th of 2011, it was presented to the council at that time, who also enthusiastically endorsed the direction that we were working on. In May 10th of 2011, we had more formalized the process. The city held an open house here in the community room. We'd invited the development community for additional comments. And again, we were moving forward full speed. In May of 2011, at the end of May, our current planning director, Mr. Limbaugh, came on board. Prior to that, we had been working a little bit with Marcia Elkins at the beginning and towards the end of that kind of on our own. And when Brett came on board, we had fairly well completed or concluded the direction we were going with the platting process. He assisted with the crafting or writing of the ordinance language and as we moved through the plan development process. And we concluded our work as a committee in about February of 2012. So roughly about 18 months we worked on that process. Now, last week, I attempted to submit a plat that was a lot line adjustment consolidation. 2 owners in Enchanted Pines had 2 parcels, one of which had been isolated or separated by what was called an H-lot plat. And he was selling that portion to his neighbor to the north. And I submitted the plat. I was told by Public Works that they couldn't sign the plat because subdivision improvements were required. And I queried that and said, why, how can that be? And I was later told to just go ahead and submit it without the signature of Public Works, which I did, and I continued to send emails and query, how can this be that we cannot submit this plat, which we've done similar plats before? And the only answer I have to date is that subdivision improvements are required. My client, Mr. Stevens, met with Brett Limbaugh last Friday, and I believe in the conversation, Brett told him that there was no platting process that allowed you to plat when there were that subdivision improvements were not required as part of the plat process, excuse me. So in other words, he's basically saying that process doesn't exist anymore. And I've been using that process for roughly the last 3 years, several times to the success of my clients. We've had no issues. Now, okay, I'll try to, I don't understand why the change, and I guess I'm going to leave copies of some definitions and some emails for you to look over, and I would like some answers as to why there's a different interpretation. And I believe that Mr. Freitag and Mr. Stevens would also like to speak to the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, the second speaker request form I have is Mr. Larry Stevens. If you could approach the podium, state your name and your affiliation to the city, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee member with any of your opinions.
Hello, I'm Larry Stevens. I'm just a citizen here. I think some of you are familiar from the development of our H lot that we had gone through with the city. My wife and I have 5 acres up in Enchanted Pines. The city wanted to run a sewer line, so the city purchased a piece of that property, 52 feet wide, through our property. Therefore, it split our property. It left about 3.5 acres on the south side and about 1.22 acres on the north side, which butts up against my neighbor's property. We've been letting that person run horses on that land to kind of keep it eaten down, and it helped her with her horses. And so we're looking at paring down and trying to move my father in with me so that we can pull him out of an assisted living. Our house is not conducive to that, so we've found a purchaser for our home. When they came to look at it, I told them that we were putting the sewer line in and connecting to the city sewer, and that left about 1.22 acres on the other side of the road, the H lot. They really didn't want their land split. They didn't want that piece. So I said, well, that's great, because that person had offered, they asked me years ago if we'd be interested in selling, and asked if she could have first right to that. So we put an offer out to her. She accepted the offer. It was a great opportunity for her to consolidate her land. It was a good opportunity for our buyers. We were able to drop the price of the house a bit because we were going to get some money for that piece of property. We had gone through this process with the city, stopped down, checked on it. Lot line adjustment was there. We're not doing any developing. Never wanted to do any developing. We're just trying to do something that works out good to get a lot line moved so that somebody has a little bit more opportunity to run their horses, which hers is general ag, ours was general ag. We went through the rezoning first to get it to Park Forest. That was approved, and then the next step was to do the lot line adjustment. We really thought, according to the ordinance at the time, that we were doing the right thing and that it was going to happen. And we kind of had that indication that this fits what the intent of that lot line adjustment really was. So we were very confident with that. But as we get this far into the process now, we haven't been able to set a closing date for our house because it was contingent upon this. It's really creating an issue for us financially. We were hoping to have an answer before now so that we could continue with our process. I'm kind of confused because, as I understood our conversation with Mr. Limbaugh on Friday, is that any platting you have to put in improvements. I've never heard that in this whole process. In fact, as I said, it appeared that we were trying to fit what the intent of that particular lot line adjustment was. And so right now my wife and I are very confused about this whole thing, and we're hoping to be able to solicit the help of the city council in order to accommodate this and hopefully come to a fair resolution. So thank you.
Thank you. And the third public comment speaker request form I have is Mr. Bill Freitag. Again, for the record, if you'd state your name and your affiliation, and you've got 3 minutes.
It's Bill Freitag, and I'm a member of the second floor review committee that we're talking about today. The issue here is it isn't just a real simple, easy thing to understand, but when Janelle said we spent 18 months, I actually spent longer than 18 months. I spent about 24 months, and we took all this stuff line by line, word by word, and we went through all of Chapter 16, part of Chapter 17, and we had a rewrite, okay? And we kept notes and so on. Now that rewrite, when we finished that up, we knew that any undertaking that large was probably going to have a hiccup in it somewhere or another. So we left it that if there was a hiccup in there, we would reconvene the committee, we would go over whatever it was, and then we would recommend to council whatever we thought the fix was. Now, I'm going to say this, I agree with Brett on one point. I'm not a big fan of large pieces of ground not having infrastructure in them inside the city limits. But the process has got to be honored here. And the process is that you passed it. We gave it to you, and we didn't imagine when we did that somebody was moving lot lines 100-200 feet. I never imagined that. Had I, then I probably would have tried to do something different, but I didn't imagine that. But that's what's come up. And so since that's come up, I think it's reasonable that this committee reconvene, look at it, and offer a amendment to it, to City Council to consider to fix it. But until that's done, I don't think that anybody should just, one side of a table being staff and the other side of the table being the second floor committee and the third side being Janelle and her clients, that one side ought to sit there and dictate what's going to happen here. It should go through a certain process. So the other thing that I want to make sure you really understand crystal clear here is I disagree with staff when they tell me what I said in that committee, because it's not what I said and it's not what the notes we took reflect. And I wrote a letter to the mayor, and I'm going to just read that to you. When the second floor committee completed rewriting the ordinance, we left it open to address any future problems that might have been overlooked. We knew a rewrite this large was likely to have areas needing additional review. As of now, our work has stood the test of time pretty well. However, something came up to light that needs to go back to the committee for more consideration. Everyone on the committee I've talked to is willing to look at the issue and address it within the scope assigned to the committee. What has created the problem Janelle now faces is the lack of attention from the second floor committee. Instead of following the procedure, staff has redefined the word parcel wrongly, and I'll give you examples where I've deeded parcels and I've bought parcels, and has rewritten the history of our committee, claiming we said things we didn't say, and that's verified by our notes. This is wrong and is creating problems and roadblocks unnecessarily. The second floor committee should have been informed a long time ago about this, and we should have taken care of it when it first came up. And I want to make you understand something here. These last three are number 12, 11, and 10. 9 times before now, this has worked, and it's went through and got approved. And it went through all the staff. I don't know what D stands for in DIRT, but the review team, development review team, maybe whatever D stands for, they looked at it.
Mr.
And 9
Freitag,
times they approved it.
If you could wrap up your 3 minutes or...
Okay. So anyway, I think you need to address it. You need a recommendation from us. We need to sit down with staff, hear them, discuss it, and see if we can find a way. So, because I don't think anybody's really in favor of hundreds of feet of no infrastructure in. I know I'm not. So let us do our job, honor what's already in writing until our job is done, and then we'll redo it. Thank you.
Thank you. I currently do not have any other public speaker request forms on items that are currently not on the agenda. Am I missing anyone? Seeing none, general public comment is now closed. The chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to add this to the agenda, item number 20, if we could. Sounds like we've got, if I could keep the floor for discussion.
Alderman Estes, would you like to offer a title for item number 23?
Lot line adjustment and lot consolidation process.
I have a motion by Alderman Estes to add an item to the Public Works agenda, item number 23, titled Lot Line Adjustment and Consolidation Process. Do I have a second?
Second.
I've got a second by Roberts. Any discussion?
I just wanted to add that it sounds like we've got some constituents that have a deal in the works, and it's kind of holding up their ability to sell some property. So I think we just need to get, if we need to take an action, we need to, and I've got questions, so I'd like to talk about this more if we could. Thanks.
All right, any other discussion concerning adding item number 23? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda has been adopted or amended to add item number 23. Thank you. I also do have another council person's light up, and that light will be excused. So we are now moving on to consent items number 1 through 19 on the Public Works agenda for today. Public comment is now open. Are there any speaker request forms? Is there anyone that would like to address or speak about a current item on the consent calendar, which is 1 through 19? I currently have none. Seeing none, we're going to close public comment, and now it is the time to consider consent items 1 through 19. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
I'd like to pull item number 9, please, Madam Chair.
Are there any other items from committee members that would like to be pulled from consent items 1 through 19? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve consent items 1 through 19, except item number 9. Got a motion by Estes to approve consent calendar 1 through 19, consent items 1 through 19, except number 9. I've got a second by Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent items 1 through 19, except item number 9, have been approved. Item number 9 is the 2015 Out of Dust project, estimated cost of $100,000. And Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to make a motion to continue this for 2 weeks, if I may.
Second.
I've got a motion by Doyle to continue item number 9, the Out of Dust project estimated at $100,000 for 2 weeks in committee. Second by Estes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 9 has been continued into the next Public Works Committee meeting. We are now on to non-consent items. Are there any audience members that would like to speak on non-consent items? It's items 20 through 23. We currently have no speaker request forms. Public comment is now closed. We are now on to non-consent items, and the first item on the non-consent calendar is item number 20, which is the discussion of road compaction issues. It's being brought forward by Alderman Ron Weifenbach. I do not believe Alderman Ron Weifenbach is here today. I would entertain a motion from a seated committee member to either send this to council without recommendation, but let me first qualify this. This was already on Public Works once, and we sent it to council without recommendation, and it was sent back to Public Works. So I would highly encourage us not to send it back to council without recommendation, since we did that. So if you want to table it, or if you want to continue it in committee, if you're asking for a report from a staff member, Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that there was something specific Mr. Weifenbach was looking for. I don't know what that was, so I can't really qualify if we have that or not. If someone, since I've already spoken, would like to make a motion just to continue this for 2 weeks in committee, we can certainly try to get Ron either here or at least get something in writing so we can have that discussion. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. make a motion to continue this for 2 weeks, and if I get a second, I'd like to keep the floor.
I've got a motion by Estes to continue item number 20, the discussion on road compaction issues, for 2 weeks in committee to the next Public Works Committee meeting, second by Roberts. Alderman Estes, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think this is an important topic for us to talk about, and City Engineer Dale Tech gave us a presentation at the last City Council meeting, but our agenda was so huge or large and looked like it was going to be very time-consuming that we agreed to set this back and talk about it another day because of the issues that we had at the last meeting. At the request of the mayor, he asked if we would, because if you remember, he had there were 5 lights in the queue. But I think, I think one of the things that we all as council people have to go back and look at is what City Engineer Tech sent us on the the compaction requirements, whether it's a city project or whether it's a developer project. We have minimum standards for compaction. It's based upon, so many feet of fill and one test for so many feet of fill for a distance. And if we want to change that, I mean, that's something we'll have to look at. And
Alderman Estes, do you have, since we're continuing, the current motion is to continue this for 2 weeks in committee, do you have any other specific information or presentation you would like?
No, sorry, I was just wanting to.
No, I'm trying to move
No,
this along.
I think we just need to hopefully pick a night when we have a calmer council agenda, and hopefully Mr. Tech can show back up and we can really discuss publicly what the requirements are. And so 2 weeks, let's take a look I'm comfortable that I think we need to keep this on the agenda until Alderman Weifenbach has his questions answered. So, thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, any other comment? As chair of the Public Works Committee, I will send an email to Alderman Weifenbach, and let's see if we can get some more clarity on exactly what he's looking for. The current motion on item number 20, the discussion of road compaction issues, is to continue this item to the next Public Works Committee meeting. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're now on to item number 21, which is the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6060 to revise the regulations relating to the private water and sewer service lines by amending Chapter 13.12 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. And Chair would like to recognize Public Works Director Terry Wolsterstorff. Terry, can you give us some insight on this item for the public record?
Yes, I will. Thank you. This proposed ordinance change makes some revisions to the way we do or handle, I would say, cost recapture on water and sewer main extensions and replacement projects, where we try to take care of some of our non-conforming services throughout the community. Historically, in the past, we have attempted to recoup 100% of our costs of those infrastructure costs, and that oftentimes creates quite a burden for homeowners. A lot of times you're dealing with a home that's been in place for 30, 40 years. They've been paying their water and sewer bill diligently every month, and when they go to replace or repair their sewer or water service line, and they realize that they have a non-conforming service line, a lot of times they're looking at a connection fee that is substantial. It can be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 easily in a lot of cases. And in my time here, I've seen it come forward in front of the council a couple of times. So what this really does is it puts that burden back on the water and sewer enterprise funds, whereby the water and sewer enterprise fund will be paying for those extensions to take care of what we would classify as non-conforming services. They're not non-conforming from a plumbing code standpoint, but from a city design standpoint. So we think this is a good move forward. I think it's good. It's good for the homeowners. It is an additional expense to the water and sewer enterprise funds. Keep that in mind. But I will say this. Generally, we do these projects with our funds, and then we recapture our costs back sometimes over a long period of time. It isn't until somebody's sewer service or water service line goes bad, that's the point at which they would actually pay that fee. So we could have a water main or sewer main extension that we do, and it may be 10, 15, 20 years later when a homeowner has a problem. That's when they come down to get their permits and they find out, lo and behold, they've got this large connection fee. And like I said, it can be quite a burden. So in my mind, these homeowners have been paying their monthly fee just like everybody else in town. I think we did put a date on here. It has to be a home that's in place prior to a specific date, and I don't have that off the top of my head. So we're not dealing with newer construction.
2007.
Thank you. We're not dealing with new construction. We're dealing with homes that have been in place for a while.
Thank you, Terry. I do have questions from committee members. Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
No question, just a thank you to Terry. We've been talking about this for a few years now, and I was one that brought a few of these to you over the years. So I just want to say thank you. I think this is going to be a big benefit to the residents of Rapid City. So thank you again, Terry.
Thank you. And then also, Terry, just to follow up with a question or two, I'm reading from your summary here that this happens very, very infrequently. Is that correct?
I'll let Dale answer that.
Chair recognizes Mr. Dale Tech.
It does happen infrequently, but that's due to the nature of the cost of things typically. There are in excess of 900 non-conforming services that the city has identified. Most of them are functioning properly, but there's a case, a couple years ago we had a case over in the West Boulevard area where there were, I believe, 4 houses connected together in the same sewer line that ran underneath all 4 homes. That became critical because the line failed and backed up sewage into homes. So those types of things are what gets taken care of, and those are very seldom. Once again, with the funding package that we had in place, or the funding split that we had in place, it was very difficult for people to even budget those amounts that we had. So this should help take care of some more non-conforming issues as we get requests.
Thank you, Mr. Tech. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mr. Tech, if I may. Thank you, Dale. I did read that there was going to be basically a directory of these non-conforming lines developed. Are we also going to communicate to the owners of those properties this, so that when they do come in for a permit at some arbitrary point in the future, they're not going to be surprised?
We already have notified all the people.
Okay.
That happened a number of years ago. We sent out a notification to all 900 people that we were aware of. That
With dollar amounts as well?
we didn't know the dollar amount. We just notified them. That was per the previous ordinance that was passed, that we were to notify them that they had a non-conforming line. I don't anticipate doing another mass mailings to let them know that we've changed the ordinance. The ones that have issues, we're in contact with. We talk to them. City staff knows that they're having issues. We'll be able to communicate to them that, hey, the policy's changed. In fact, we've got a number of them that are on the books that we're gonna get projects going on right away here. So we're just waiting for this ordinance to change.
Thank you. And can you explain a little bit to me why that cutoff line of January 2007 was established, how that was derived?
I believe that was about the time that the previous ordinance was adopted, and I think the thinking then was, we've identified non-conforming, so from this day forward, we're not going to, the ordinance is in place, you need to build things correctly, so from this day forward, you're supposed to build things right, and we're not going to participate in anything that you may do wrong in the future. And that's, I believe, why it was there. It was a little before my time, but I believe that was the intent of that date.
All right, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make a motion to approve, and if we get a second, I'd like to keep the floor.
I've got a motion by Estes to approve item number 21 and a second by Doyle. Alderman Estes, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Just quickly, I just want to move this along to council, but I know I'll have, after first reading, I know I have a few questions before Monday night's council meeting, but I'll just, since I got to sit on that engineering review committee, when I first got on, because there's quite a few of these non-conforming projects going on in my ward right now, and so I'll have some questions, so thanks.
Thank you. I currently have a motion to approve. Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 22 is the report on bridge inspections and funding for painting of the Autumn Hills Bridge. Chair recognizes Public Works Director Terry Wolsterstorff.
We do not have a formal presentation or report, but more of a general update for you guys on where we are on bridge repair. We currently have a project that we are letting here soon, I believe, to do some bridge repair work in Rapid City. But the repair work requested by the Autumn Hills Homeowner Association is not on that list. Main reason is this. We really are trying to focus our spending on bridge repairs that are spelled out and recommended in our bridge inspections that we do every 2 years on our bridges. They really spell out those repairs that should be done to keep that bridge structurally sound. What was requested by the homeowners out there really was an aesthetics, I wouldn't even call it repair, but you call it repainting of the structure there. That structure that they wanted repainting really serves no structural purpose. So because our funding is limited, I really can't in good conscience recommend spending money on that aesthetic repair when we know we've got other needs with bridge repairs throughout the community. So at this point, we are recommending not taking any action to do any type of painting on that bridge structure.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, I believe part of the discussion, because I don't see any other committee members up at this time for a motion, but so I'll pose a question to you, Mr. Wolsterstorff. During the time, the conversation also included the potential of seeing if within the budget the city could supply the paint and have a volunteer group. Has that been looked at with the property owners up there or the residents up there?
I will be pursuing that. In fact, I traded some phone calls with Jim Meyer, I believe was the resident that called us initially, and him and I have been trading phone calls today, but that's something that I will present to him as an option.
So that is something that the city could coordinate?
I think we could probably swing.
All right. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the information we have available to us right now, I make a motion to acknowledge.
I've got a motion to acknowledge the update, not report, update on the bridge inspections and funding for painting the Autumn Hills Bridge. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I've got a second by Doyle. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're now on to the amended agenda item number 23, which is the lot line adjustment and consolidation process. And the chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably a question for Mr. Limbaugh, if I may. I'm seeing a reference in some correspondence I have to one of the handouts. I know we give packets to people who come in inquiring about these different processes that we have. And on one of these handouts, it says that subdivision improvements are not required for a lot line adjustment or consolidation plat. Can we get a copy of that handout for Monday night? It's not something I've actually seen. And can you explain a little bit about that and your take on what's been presented before us today?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Today?
Sure.
I'd love it today.
Let me walk through the platting process with you. There are a number of different things that were approved. Essentially, if you were going to do a subdivision and it required public improvements, what you need to do is you need to go to the Planning Commission with a preliminary plan. This is a layout, essentially, of what your subdivision is going to look like. After that, you file a final plat, which then actually creates the lots, and that's the document that gets recorded. Along with that, you submit to us a development agreement, which provides surety and a time frame for when you're going to do those public improvements. And then you also have development plans that go along with that, and that describes all the streets and sewer and things that you're responsible for. Those are the public improvements that you're going to construct. Now, if there's something within that that you don't want to do, let's say, for example, you don't want to do sidewalks. And in some instances, that's acceptable if it's a rural section. You then go to our staff and ask for that exception. Most of those, I would say probably 99% of those, get approved by staff. Every once in a while, you here at council get to see those because the staff has denied it. And in this case, I think that's the appropriate method for this subdivision to go through. Go through a preliminary planning process, go through a final platting process, and ask council for an exception to waive the construction of the street. If we don't do that, and we use one of the other processes, then I don't have anything that I can require someone to build the street with later on when a building permit is pulled. So that is the particular conundrum that we're in. We have some administrative processes. One of them is a lot line adjustment, one of them is a consolidation plat, and one of them is a minor platting process. Those were put into place when public improvements were already constructed. So what a lot line adjustment would do is it would take existing lots, and you and your neighbor could shift your lot line back and forth because of a particular situation or circumstance. Or, for example, when we do townhome plats and the townhomes get built and that lot line needs to be tweaked a little bit, that gives us a good ability to do that with a lot line adjustment. There's also a consolidation plat. Again, public improvements are already in. And that's when someone wants to take a number of lots and turn them into a single lot, or a number of lots and turn them into 2 lots, for example. Reason we allow that to happen is because, again, the public improvements are already in. We're already dealing with platted parcels. And so there really isn't anything that should prohibit us approving the plat. And lastly, there's a thing called a minor plat. And a minor plat is when you want to increase density. So let's say you already have an existing lot or 2 and you want to turn that into 5 lots. Well, as long as the public improvements are already in, you can go ahead and do that as well. So those were the 3 ways that we wanted to allow people to adjust plats administratively. As long as the improvements were in, we didn't see that there was any harm in adjusting the lot line, consolidating lots, or creating lots.
Okay, and I'm aware of the fact that we are installing the sewer line through this particular property. According to the future plan, what other improvements do you foresee for that parcel?
You know, if you look at in an aerial photograph, Enchanted Pines Drive, essentially, the dedication is there for the sewer line. If you look at it, it would seem clear that the roadway is going to get extended also in the future, and that's why this one was brought to my attention, because it looked like the roadway needed to be constructed. I don't know who's going to be responsible for doing that eventual construction. I'm not sure if the current owners want to do that, or whether or not the council would want to give an exception, for example, to put those costs off to a future date. But, I mean, that's entirely within your purview.
Well, I guess just off the top of my head, considering that the road improvement really would not benefit the property owner, all it's going to do is bring traffic through their property, and that's all that, I mean, I've seen people sneak through there right now. So I guess I'm not 100% convinced that that would be that would fall on the property owner's shoulders. To me, that seems like that would be a city need, that something we would have to negotiate down the road. If I may change track, thank you, Brett, and ask Janelle Fink some questions. Appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Yes, as long as Ms. Fink is willing to answer them.
Oh, you know me. I'm always happy to visit.
Okay, I also read a reference to someone, I believe from staff, saying that the process had been abused, and that's why they were taking a different direction with the process you believe you initiated versus the one they believe is the best course of action to take. Can you just kind of, I don't have a lot of information on that.
Okay. If I could, when I'm finished, if there's time, I really would like to comment to some of the things that Brett said. But from what I understand, or my personal opinion is that they believe that the lot line adjustment process has some holes or openings that allow certain people to avoid doing subdivision improvements when they may otherwise have been required to do them. So in my understanding, I feel that they believe that there's an omission or an error or a loophole or something that needs to be addressed or corrected or amended.
Okay, and thank you, Janelle. And if I may, I'll definitely give you an opportunity to address some of those points. But just for my colleagues' benefit, about 4 years ago, I went traipsing around the adjacent property, Sunny Stevens, no relation, spelled differently, to look at what's happened to her property because of the development uphill. The side of her hill has turned into a swamp, and you don't see that. I mean, it is really extraordinary. It's remarkable. And all this time, it sounded to me, because Sunny wasn't pressing the issue, that things were getting handled. At first it was looked at as, well, the drought's over now, and that's what we're seeing. But, this kind of vegetation you don't really see grow in where it's growing. So all that they're trying to do here is to swap or readjust this lot line so that the land that Sunny she has 10 acres, has used for years for her horses to graze, she can now graze on land that isn't toxic and swampy. That's all they're trying to do. Nobody's building anything. Nobody's, it's fair to, so we're only hearing one side from Larry and Mary Stevens on just, holding up the works and selling their property. But really there's another issue here too. So it's a slightly bigger picture. I think allowing this would be the right thing to do. But Janelle, I really do appreciate all the work that you put into that whole second floor process, and you know much more about it than I do. So if you would not mind addressing some of the points that have been going back and forth up here, just to have your perspective from being a member of that committee, I'd appreciate it.
And Janelle, before you do that, just to clarify, Alderwoman Doyle, just a clarifying point. When you mentioned Sunny Stevens is a contiguous property that to the north of Mr. Stevens' property, who spoke today, Larry Stevens. That's the lot line adjustment that they're looking for. So that's why you were talking about her property.
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. I am going to respectfully disagree with Director Limbaugh on his interpretation of this plat process, and I am going to claim more knowledge and familiarity with this process since I was there from day one through everything. The reason that we created a lot line adjustment process was because it was so difficult for neighbors to make adjustments in lot lines. During the old process, you had to do a layout, a preliminary, a final. You had to have subdivision variances anytime that your streets were not to current code or standard. And in each one of your wards, you can find areas or districts where streets or improvements are not up to current standards. You've got Carriage Hills, you've got Springbrook Acres, you've got Canyon Lake area, you've got Laurel Heights. There's even some areas, I believe, in the Robbinsdale area where your streets don't meet those improvements. And the reason that we created this process was to allow landowners to make that small exchange when there was no increase in density and allow them a shorter version of the process and not hold somebody liable for a street improvement if the street's been that way for ages, and we've been living next door to each other with no sidewalks or no curb and gutter, why should we have to go through the lengthy and expensive process and risk being required to do that when there's no increase in density? It's just an adjusting of lot lines. It's not, I'm making a new lot so I can build a development. I'm not doing a subdivision whereby I divide my lot and I have lots to sell or those kinds of different things. This is still a pretty simple process. And the hallmark of that was that no improvements would be required. It would be this shortened version. We kept the minor plat process because when improvements are in place, this is still a shortened version. Brett, you can do a consolidation under a minor plat. You can do an adjustment under a minor plat. If subdivision improvements were required all the time, there is no reason to even have a lot line adjustment consolidation plat. It would be entirely redundant. You would do that all under the minor plat process. And I will say to my last breath, and the other committee members have been in contact by email with Pat Telestis and Jeff Loggy, and I know that Bill Bill has been here, and that was the whole intent of that process, was to waive or omit subdivision improvements. If it was okay today, it's okay tomorrow if there's just an adjustment between common lot lines or parties, or there's a decrease in density where you actually limit the city's liability and potential future development. And we've done these multiple times. And I had one other instance where we had a similar plat in last fall. It was with Rapid City Economic Development Foundation out on the Rushmore Regional Industrial Park. They own a huge unplatted balance where when somebody comes along to buy a lot, they plat a lot, and they've been dealing with this big unplatted remainder. And they had one of the developers out there who had 2 lots. And they wanted to combine their 2 lots together and take a little bit of the Economic Development Foundation land and consolidate that together. So in my mind, 2 lots and an unplatted parcel to 1 lot and an unplatted parcel is a consolidation plat. We submitted it as such, and staff rejected it. And my understanding was they rejected it because we were leaving an unplatted remainder, not because subdivision improvements were required as part of the process. My understanding was that if we dealt strictly and consolidated both of the parcels and did not leave any unplatted remainder, we were fine doing this. So I'm so confused, because if there was a problem, why weren't we talking about this 6 months ago? If there's a loophole, why aren't we having the dialogue? Why are we having these processes interrupted midstream when we've submitted these applications? And I'm not the only one. I think Doyle Estes has an application in as well that this affects. So I'm just kind of stymied and confused. And I think Brett is incorrect in his interpretation.
And when did this process begin?
We started using this process in 2012, so we've been using this for 3 years.
For this instance?
Yeah, for the lot line adjustment consolidation, we've been using it for 3 years.
For the Stevens property?
Oh, I apologize, I misunderstood you. We submitted the Stevens property last week.
And you may not be able to speak to it, but do you know what kind of timeline we're looking at? I know it's holding up a closing date, but is there
There's
the urgency about this?
There's a 13-day working review and approval process, and we've been told that it will be reviewed, but the plat was not signed by Public Works, and without their signature, it can't be approved.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, if I may. Last question. What kind of timeline are you facing with having this held up?
Well, we were hoping to have this done by about the first week of June. That was the total process as we worked with a realtor with our house. So that's why we're kind of under some other things, and those are personal things with sale of the house, sale of the property. We can't sell the house until the property sells. We can't do that, and so we've been kind of at the mercy of the process here over the last a couple months, because we had to put the rezoning in. We couldn't do it because we were general ag.
Right.
So we had to rezone, so we had to go through that process. After that process was done, then we started the platting process for that. If I may stretch it just a little bit, we looked at this years ago. We bought that 5 acres thinking at some point we might be able to have another house on it and let our kids take our house and then take care of us in another house. That was the process that we had in our picture when we started. Probably 7 or 8 years ago, I came down to the city to say, what do I need to do in order to put another house up there so that we can do that? Well, they said if you plat that, you have to put in all the road improvements. We didn't want to pay that, so that changed our whole dream, and so now we've gone a totally different direction. And in order to do what we want to do again, which is the key cog is personal. We want to take my dad out of an assisted living, and in order to do that, we're going to find a smaller place because ours is just too big, and it's not conducive to his health. So it fit really well with Sonny Stevens' needs. Again, no relation, and so the whole thing just seemed to fit. And when we looked at the ordinance, it just really seemed to fit, and I I struggle. I try to simplify things. I work with young people, so I try to simplify things as much as possible. And to me, this one's just gotten cloudier and cloudier and cloudier along the way. And so I don't understand it when we were trying to do the right thing. I don't have a problem with doing the improvements. We made a decision based upon the information we had. We couldn't do that, didn't want to do it. Now we thought there was a place where it did fit and tried to follow the process, and we're kind of hung up. So it's a little urgent for us.
One last question. Who suggested the consolidation process to you?
When I came down to check in on it, I think Janelle was the one that had expressed that to us because we knew we had to get the boundaries of our lot figured out. And the city had used Fisk Engineering to do the H lot. So we just said, well,
Okay.
we'll just use them because it makes sense. They already know what that situation is. And so we called Janelle or called Fisk. I didn't know who Janelle was at the time. So I called Fisk and said, would you be willing to plat this? And she said, here's something that we think might work. So
All right, I appreciate you answering
Thank
my
you.
questions. Thank you very much. And it looks like Mary had...
do.
Okay.
I do.
I don't know
I
what
have-
to ask you, but if you would give her a little latitude, Madam Chair, I'd appreciate it.
My name is Mary Stevens, and I'm Larry's spouse. I had actually started the process. I called Fletcher at the city and had talked to him about the possibility of doing this. And he told me the process that we needed to go through, that there were applications that had to be filled out, that there were fees that had to be paid in order to get the process started. We did that. When we visited with people, they said there should not be a problem with this. You know, you're not developing anything, all you're doing is a lot line adjustment. The things that Larry has kind of alluded to, I did run a daycare preschool in our home. We have, since we sold the house, everything looked like it was going well. We have stopped that. Everything for us has come to a screeching halt. And when he's saying the urgency, it is a big urgency for us because our income has drastically been cut. And it was cut because we were told, yes, things are going to go, there's nothing, and then all of a sudden there's a hiccup. So you have to understand that we went through what we were told to do, and we hope that this process will continue the way it was stated to us, or we would not have done that in the first place. So
Well,
I
I'm hoping
appreciate
that
it.
as well. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
I yield.
And we think we communicate well, but when she did that with Fletcher, I had been in contact with Vicky down here, and Vicky also shared similar thoughts with me. In fact, that's who gave me the application to start the process and walk through the process. So she got it from one, I got it from another, and it was similar talk at the time. So
Mr. Stevens, clarifying point. I believe Alderwoman Doyle asked Ms. Fink when your application process started, and she had indicated just a week ago. But listening to you and your wife, this process actually started, what date would you say this process started?
well, it would have been around the 1st of March. Again, the planning process just started with them, but the whole process, again, started back when we had to do the rezoning. And so, I mean, that's on record with the department when that actually was turned in. So we had conversations before that to get the information that we needed to move on. So I would just like to say, I would hope that, and again, one way or the other, I just hope there's a decision made fairly pronto, because if it's denied, we've got to go a totally different direction quick. And so if it's approved, great, then we know where we're heading. If it's denied, we got to change directions, and we got to do it pretty doggone quick. So we would appreciate a decision one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Go ahead, Janelle, you can get up, and then I'm going to ask Bill a question. But Janelle, I imagine the reason you just brought this forward is because you thought the process was going to be roughly a 2-week ordeal and you were going to get it okayed.
Absolutely. It should have been a submit this. It should have been signed by Public Works before we submit it, 13 days, and no problem. And it's kind of turning into a train wreck.
Yes, it sounds like that. I got a couple of questions for Mr. Freytag, if you don't mind. Bill, you said there was 9 other applications. Could you, off your head, give them to me, or do you have them where you could email them to me? Because I'd like to research those and look at them.
I'll do that. I'll email those to you. Those, there's 12 of these total since our second floor committee and recommended it and you passed it. There's been 12 of these total. So 9 of them, Charity, if there was any abuse, Brett Limbaugh signed off on 9 of them, so I don't know how anybody can be abusing it. The 3 are all within the last 30 days. So the fix here, so that Janelle's client can proceed with his life and what he's doing with his property, is he can be number 10, 11, or 12. And then in the meantime, what needs to happen is a second floor committee has got to sit down with staff. We need to get all of the information back and forth, and we need to come to you with a fix. And the fix can be as simple, I'd like to sit down with everybody, but here's how simple the fix is. Take the word parcel out, or add the word platted lot, or just put a definition on how many feet you can move a line. It's not rocket science to fix this, but that's what should be being expedient here is follow the letter of the law the way it's written for these last 3, and before you get a 4th one, have an amendment to you to address it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freytag. I have a question for Brett Limbaugh real quick. I may come back to you, Bill.
Just for clarifying, Alderman Roberts, before you go on, you've requested Mr. Freytag to send you the information. If you wouldn't mind forwarding that on to the committee members and Mr. Limbaugh when you get it?
I could also ask Mr. Limbaugh to send that information to all of us.
That would be great. That would be
So
great.
you can still send it to me, Bill, so I can cross-reference everything. Mr. Limbaugh, is one of the reasons why this came forward and came in this direction now because of the future master plan? Because you identified a street being there? Because I know the city really likes to make people pay for infrastructure if we can get it out of them.
Yeah, this wasn't really a master planning issue as much as it was brought to my attention that there was a roadway involved here that, and the platting was being done, or in this case, a lot line adjustment, and that there was a concern that the road would not be constructed. And so that's how that plat came to me. If there was something simple on a lot line adjustment, I'm not going to see them.
And what makes this different on a lot line adjustment than any other one? I guess that, in my mind, because we don't have a lot of information in front of us, I don't see anything being excessive. I mean, if there wasn't the lot line changed, the infrastructure wouldn't be asked to be added in right now. So, if we're just moving a lot line, what's changing so much?
I think this gets back to the single issue of public improvements and what do you as council want to do with subdivisions. I mean, we could make a subdivision process extremely easy, which is to say that we get rid of all of these different types and we just go to a final platting process. And it's done administratively, because if you're platting, you have to plat in accordance with what the zone district requirements are. There are frontage requirements, there's lot area requirements, and then there are engineering requirements as well. So it makes more sense to me, if we're going to go and retool this, that we do a process that's considerably simpler. Just have one platting process. If public improvements are required, then you need to submit the development engineering plans and the developer's agreement. If someone doesn't want to do public improvements, they can come and ask for an exception, and it's either approved or denied by our engineers, and if it gets denied, then it comes to you as council, and you can make a decision like this one right here today that, we don't think we want to build that road, so go ahead and do a final plat. So I think that's the easiest way to fix this. And so what I would ask you to do today is, if you decide that you would want to give these folks some relief, go through at least the formal exception process, so at least it's on record that the council determined that the roadway was not needed. I don't know that I as staff, or Terry for that matter, it's really more of a public works issue than it is a planning issue, would want to waive a requirement to construct public improvements. I think that's something for the council to do.
Can I ask one more question on these other 9 or 12 or whatever it was since this came through? How many of them had improvements on them, do you know?
You know, I don't. I'm going to have to take a look at all of those plats because, you know, Pauline and Terry and I sign each one of those plats, but we don't do the work.
Okay. One more question for Mr. Freytag. Maybe you can remember if any of these had public improvements on them.
No, these are apple and apple comparisons. Now, there might have been one or two in there where it was really small. Okay. And there was one of them that I remember, it was pretty large, it was 1 to 200 feet, that it was not approved on.
Okay. Thank you very much. I know one thing, we need a lot more information on this. I hate the fact that, that we're prolonging the Stevens on a very bad situation that started a long, long time ago. I'd like to see us be able to resolve this so they can get on with their lives. Thank you very much.
Can I add one thing, Amanda?
Not unless a committee member directs a question. Do you have a topic in which you want to address? Is it about the committee?
Yes, this on this topic.
Alderman Roberts still has the floor.
I have to direct a question, so do you have any questions or do you have any answers on this topic? I don't know.
I do. Listen, when Brett's trying to he's a revisionist here. He's not going by the letter of the law that's written, and he would like to persuade you that you gotta, you know, everybody wants infrastructure in. You do, I do, everybody does. But we have a process already in place that allowed it to happen without infrastructure. So he doesn't get to come in here and reinvent what's already there. What he gets to do is come in and amend what's already there. That's what I have to do. That's what you would have to do on your property. And so he has to come in and do the same thing. He's got to follow the process for an amendment to that to fix this problem the way he views it. And that's what we're trying to get done. So what he needs to be encouraged to do is have this second floor committee sit down with him, find a solution, bring it to you so you can amend it, and it's done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair recognizes the City Attorney Joel Ledeen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I haven't had enough time to totally get up to speed on this, but you know, the reason we are having this discussion now and it was denied is because there have been some that come in, and I can't speak to the 9 that have been previously approved, but there certainly was a lot of situations where we did recognize and support. I support what Janelle said. You know, when you have 2 people that have been living next to each other for 20 years and they've not had a city built to city street standards, you're just going to adjust the lot line should they have to go through all that and get an exception. That was understandable. I guess I'm not disputing what their recollection of it was. I guarantee you Janelle was more involved in it than I was and did take better notes. I will say that my recollection or my understanding, and maybe it's, I don't put this on anyone else, this is on me, but my understanding was, again, that what we were talking about is adjusting lot lines in situations like that where no improvements were really needed. Now, maybe they technically could have been called for because somebody hadn't built to city standards, but in situations where it was pretty obvious there wasn't going to be improvements needed, that it was not going to be a way to plat unplatted balances and things like that. And from my perspective, that's what really concerns me. And you know, even Mr. Freytag recognizes that, yeah, there's some issues there, and I agree we need to look at that and make sure we address those. The reason we're sitting here now is that there are other applications, and it isn't just the Stevens. Mr. Estes has an application in where he's using the lot line adjustment and requesting to replat a large portion of an unplatted balance that would involve the construction normally if it went through the platting process of Homestead Street. So that's from staff's perspective. We're all sitting here today talking about you know, Mr. Stevens' property, but we're looking at the other applications we have, and maybe we should have looked at the applications that came in earlier, but I think that the reason we're sitting here now is this was drawn to Brett's attention, and before he had signed them and not realized necessarily, and that answers why we're here now. You know, the Stevens case is a tough case because that road, I mean, we had a discussion, honestly, I don't know if you recall, but when we got the easement for the water line, I know that Mr. Stevens talked to us at that time about construction of the road or how the road was going to get built. And the city made clear, look, we're not interested in extending this road at city expense. And when the land develops and the lots are platted, then the road will get built. The problem is, if you look at that, there isn't going to be enough lots there to justify the cost of building the road. So what's going to ultimately probably end up happening, if you were to take a strict stance of, no, we're not going to allow you to plat this without, or this lot line adjustment without building the road, is it would just stay as it is now. It probably would never get built anyway. But this is a situation where, if you look at it, this lot line is going to adjust it, and you're going to have a large section of road where now you have two large lots that are probably never going to be further subdivided. And so there's going to be that section of road that nobody else is ever going to build. And as a council, you can certainly say, well, as Alderman Doyle did, maybe that's something that we should just take as a city expense if we want to see that connection. I mean, there are people, I don't know how much of a need there really is ever going to be for this section. There are people, and in fact, I will claim to be one of them, that have used that, though, when I was coming up from 16 and didn't realize it wasn't connected, and took the gravel to get down to the south side of Enchanted Pines. But, you know, how many people from the south side want to go up and exit at 16? I don't know. But we are concerned about this because of not necessarily just this application, but because of some of the other applications that have been submitted. And whether or not the other plat should have been approved or not, this one and the other applications that have come in have highlighted the issue to us. And before we just signed it, and somebody sat there someday and said, how come this is all being developed and, say, Homestead Street isn't built? We wanted it to get in front of you. And as far as a delay, it's my understanding that if this had just gone through Mr. Stevens' application had just gone through the normal process, it would have been for review on June 9th. So it's not like at this point this has really been delayed significantly, depending on how you proceed or how we decide to move forward. It could be potentially, but just as staff, I think that we felt it was time to have this discussion in front of council before all of these got approved and we moved forward. Now it's, I guess, up to all of you to decide how we're going to move forward.
Thank you, Joel. I do have a couple more lights up here. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make a motion to send this on to council without recommendation. If I get a second, I'd like to keep the floor.
I've got a motion to send item number 23 to council without recommendation by Estes, second by Roberts. Alderman Estes, you still have the floor.
Thank you. At this point in time, I purely lack information. I mean, I like to see lines in front of me and plats and lots, and I'm a little reluctant to do a motion as Mr. Limbaugh recommended, using the term exception, because that would be acknowledging that there, right this time, there's a requirement, and I got to personally sort this out on my own. So I'm hoping that between now and Monday night, everybody can get all the information we need linked, and we can study this and discuss it as a full council Monday night, and hopefully not. However it goes down, and we don't know, the Stevens know what the fate of this decision is. Thanks. I yield.
Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to make sure we're all clear on what we should be provided. You have a good idea of what we need to see in front of us so that we have a full and complete picture from staff's perspective. And Janelle, the same thing. Anything that you can submit to help those of us that aren't as familiar with this issue visualize it, that'd be great.
Thank you. I currently have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
I've got a motion by Estes to adjourn, second by Roberts. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.